America, we stand for freedom. Though freedom is never really free, we yearn and strive for government protecting our liberty.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Your Right to Know, brought to you by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. We have a very special event tonight. I will be your co-host. My name is Attorney Andrew Couture, and tonight I have many different hosts with me. First one is Sue Smiley. She's the Worcester Middlesex MASSGOP Committeewoman.
Hi, Andrew.
And we have Michael Clark. He is an honors graduate from Lunenburg High School, and we have Abby Pickett finishing up her junior year at Wachusett Regional High School. And tonight our host is the MASSGOP Chairman, Jim Lyons. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Jim.
Thank you for having me.
So, first of all, please provide our viewers with a brief history of your background, your personal business, and the history of being a state representative and now MASSGOP Committee Chairman.
So I've started my business many years ago when I was about your age, selling flowers on a street corner. And my wife and I grew the company into a company called Dandelions, where we sell flowers, ice cream, and Christmas trees. We cover all the seasons. And when I was young, I was a Democrat, ran for office, was elected when I was 23 as a member of the school committee in Arlington, and ran for the state senate twice before I was 28 as a Democrat. And then I got to listen to Ronald Reagan, and I became a Republican. And then my wife and I built our company over 30 plus years. We have two boys. They're now in their 20s. And about 8 or 9 years ago, I'd been active locally in politics. I decided to run for state representative, and I got elected and served for 8 years. And I guess you would say that I was an outspoken conservative on Beacon Hill, and enjoyed exposing how the Democrats operate. And the Democrats rewarded me with that behavior. In 2018, they spent $300,000 to beat me, and they did. And a couple days after I lost, my wife encouraged me to run for party chair, and I did. And that was on January 17th. And now we're working very hard to try to increase our ranks in the Massachusetts legislature and expose the Democrats for what they are, which is a party that is moving radically to the left. And so that's real quickly what I'm about.
I just have to say that I'm very happy to hear that it was Ronald Reagan. He is. I actually met Ronald Reagan. I was maybe about 5 years old, and we took a tour of the White House. And I remember he was walking down the hall, and I motioned to my parents, saying, Mom, Dad, that's the president. And he said, the kid's right.
That's pretty good.
I have a picture of him in my office. It was a very, very memorable event. But well, thank you. You've done a lot for the party, and I think some of our co-hosts have some questions for you. Susan?
Yeah. So Jim, welcome to the district. It's great to have you back. You've been a star here in our district and doing some great things for the party. I feel happy to have you leading the MASSGOP in today's world. And I think to get a better understanding, and I know these young folks have some really great questions, and I'm anxious to hear them, but maybe you could tell the folks a little bit about what your primary objectives are for the MASSGOP in an environment that is very challenging. Be interested to know what your top 3 objectives are coming in, and what you've accomplished thus far.
So that's a great question, and I think in this environment, as you point out, it's kind of a nasty environment, and I think if you listen to the intro song, it talks about freedom, and in going back to what we mentioned about Ronald Reagan and freedom being so important, that we're one generation away from losing our freedom. So I think the number one objective that I have is to make sure that the message of, on a broad scale, what Republicans stand for, which is freedom, individual liberty, personal responsibility, and an economic system based on free enterprise and capitalism. And so that's our first thing, is to make sure we get our message out there. Second thing is to grow our membership. Right now we're, there's 1,500,000 Democrats in the state, and there's 475,000 Republicans, and 2.5 million unenrolled. And I think if Coach Belichick looked at that, the first thing he would say is we need to increase our ranks, in our Republican Party. And then finally, it's to get candidates, to get young people, to get candidates interested and involved in running for office. First election I was involved in was when I was 18 years old. So I think those are the three top things, Susan, and I think if we can get that accomplished, we'll start to move Massachusetts in a new direction.
Great, great. Well, again, I think, of course, Jim, you hadn't talked about this, but I know that it touches all of us, and how we get those good candidates, and more importantly, how we support those good candidates to victory is about money, right?
That's right.
And so money makes the lovely world go round. So if we were to ask, or we were to talk about that, a lot of people enjoy giving money directly to their candidates, but more importantly, could you talk to us a little bit about why it's important to support the Mass GOP with funding? What you do, what your plan is for supporting the candidates that we do have coming up?
So one of the things that was real important at the beginning was for me to understand how the whole process worked at the Mass GOP, and to see how the funding mechanisms work. And after the first 35 or 45 days, I got my hands wrapped around that. And one of the things that we want to do is to support our candidates. Right now, we've already begun a door-knocking campaign in the Bill Ricker area, Representative Lombardo, to reach out to some of those unenrolled folks who voted in the Republican primary of 2016. So we're knocking on doors. So the reason it's so important that the party has funding is to support our candidates, because we can add value-added dollars to their campaigns. And you're only limited to $1,000 per candidate to donate, whereas the party can raise money in higher volume, and that is very helpful. So we can use our dollars to support our candidates, whether it be through Facebook ads, through mailings, through door knocking, through press releases, and that's what we've put in place, a system to help all of our elected officials right now, and then to reach out to candidates across the state, to run for office, knowing that we're going to support them, and that's why the funding is so important at the GOP level.
So what should the Republican Party do in order to be able to get the independents over? Like, what can individual people do?
So I think people can do is to really talk about what the Republican Party stands for, and in this environment, everybody I talk to knows that how aggressive the people on the left have become. They
venomous almost.
Right, and they want to silence us, and that's the last thing we ought to do. We have to be totally unafraid of what our message is. I've been a business guy since I was 21 years old, so I get it. I get what the regulations, the taxation, and all of the things that they do, the Democrats in Massachusetts try to do to stifle business. And they're also very aggressive on other issues. And what we have to do is get back to the core principles. We have to talk in broad principles. And it's what I talked about at the beginning, Ronald Reagan's message. And the one thing we have to remember about Ronald Reagan, he didn't do it in a mean, aggressive, arrogant way. He did it in a very straightforward. He was proud to be a Republican. He was proud to stand for freedom. He was proud to talk about what makes Massachusetts and America great. And we have to live by that. We can't get into the gutter with the way the Democrats want to talk. We have to talk about our issues. Let's compare freedom to socialism. Let's compare the rule of law to illegal immigration. Let's compare overtaxation to allowing people to earn their own money and keep most of it. When we start comparing our principles and our values to the Democrats, we win all the time. So we have to be unafraid, and we have to do it in a manner that's, you know, I'm proud to be a Republican. I'm proud to be an American, and I'm proud to be a Republican. And we have to speak and sing that tune, you know, right to the ballot box. And that's how we're going to grow. That's how we're going to bring on the road to us.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys. You're here today, and you know we could talk all the time. Mike, you have a...
So Ms. Lyons, thank you again for coming. I was just wondering if you have any kind of like advice you could give for young conservatives like me or Abby, you know, especially with the adversity and hatred that we kind of go through school with, even from teachers sometimes, on what we can do to kind of face that head on.
So, as I mentioned to you, when I was a young man, 18, I got involved in politics, and I think what you folks have to go back to is to look to Reagan. I mean, Reagan gives us a coloring book, so to speak, you know, color by the numbers approach, what we just talked about. And you have to stand up, and one thing you have to really make sure that you have is your facts. You can't get into debates and try to talk strictly on rhetoric. You have to talk about principles. You have to talk about what America stands for. Don't be afraid to go back to the Constitution and speak about those things. And when people get aggressive to you, I always tell my liberal friends, and I went to Brandeis and most of my friends were liberals, every time they want to get into an argument and they start to get nasty, that's a sign that they're losing the argument. So you don't want to get into that argument. You want to stand up and discuss the issues the way you know the issues, but be prepared. The first thing, every time I went down to speak as a member of the member of the State House, I had my facts. So if you wanted to get into a discussion with me, I was prepared for it. So you have to be really prepared and be unafraid. Be unafraid, and don't get into it in an arrogant manner. Get into it in a manner that's positive, talking about what a great country this is, because it is a great country, and it's a great country because of the fundamental principles of our founding fathers.
Definitely.
So, the mass Republicans and unenrolled voters who lean conservative tend to be very divided on their approach to political philosophy. Our governor, Charlie Baker, he's a centralist, let's face it. Many believe that he's too liberal. Others believe that Governor Baker would not have gotten elected if he had more conservative leanings. Many of our base Republican voters believe that we need to have a chairman. As a chairman, do you bring these two very different sides together so we can identify and elect strong candidates who uphold the Republican values of liberty, constitutional rights, self-determination, personal responsibility, and conservative fiscal responsibility?
Yeah, so I think Charlie Baker gets a bad rap on some of that stuff. I just want you to know that. I served in the legislature with Governor Baker for 4 years, and I want people to think about what he's up against as a chief executive in Massachusetts, 125 to 35. He has no sustainable authority to even sustain a veto. My job as a chairman is to give him that. And that's why I say the legislature is where the power is. So I believe we have to have a tent that encompasses all Republicans. And we have to not pick and choose. Sometimes we're not going to agree on every single issue. But I'll challenge any Republican who's in office, who you can point to, who doesn't agree on the fundamental principles that we just laid out there. And I'm going to tell you right now, the Democrats don't believe that. They don't agree with our issues. Every single presidential candidate is trying to out-left the other one. So we've got a diverse party. I mean, we've got President Trump and we've got, you know, Charlie Baker, two great leaders who do it differently. And my job and our job as Republicans is to recognize who we're trying to beat, and that's the Democrats. So I encourage people to run, whatever your positions are, as long as you agree with our core principles. We can disagree about some of the fundamental issues, but going forward, we have to really recognize that the Democrats are serious about their radical socialist agenda, and we better be just as serious about our agenda of freedom and personal responsibility in a free enterprise system based on capitalism.
It's interesting that you bring in the national the national race for the Democrats. Joe Biden has pulled to be president, but you have all of these far left Democrats, and Joe Biden is left saying, "Wait a second, he was a centralist again, for the most part, but now he's being out left by the left." And now he's got to steer more towards the left in order to keep up with the radical socialist. It's interesting that you bring that up. So.
Well, I think, Andrew, again, I think we have to remember we unite together on our principles, and they're going to be like us in 2016. They're going to have, I don't even know how many candidates they have.
23 right now.
23.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to even grow, right? So it's our opportunity to
Absolutely.
unite and to share in the values and keep moving forward.
That's
as
right.
we are with
Yeah.
great policies. And I think Charlie Baker's been a great governor. He's done so many wonderful things. He's working with the administration despite whatever's being said. He's leading the opioid crisis for the president. He's doing a lot of things that I think a lot of people don't recognize. So,
Yeah, if I could just follow up on that. As you said, Charlie Baker was the first governor to come out and introduce legislation on the opiate epidemic. Charlie Baker took the lead on the Pacheco Act to take on the MBTA. Charlie Baker has put together a plan for infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, without raising taxes. Completely the opposite of what the Democrats have done. And in the legislature, I watched him veto $500 million of spending every single year of the Democratic pork, and every single one of those vetoes was overridden because the power rests in the legislature, and that's what we have to do, build it up from the bottom up.
Being part of the youth, I've already had experiences where it's hard to be identified as a conservative. How do you plan on promoting the GOP in high school environments and for college students?
So one of the youngest moderators in Massachusetts right now is a young man named Jason Ross. And Jason Ross came out of the college Republicans. He was president of college Republicans. And what we're doing is reaching out through the colleges.
Jason works for you.
Jason Ross works in my office. He worked in my office in the legislature, and now he came to work for us at the MassGOP. So we've got an intern program that we're working with members of Cast Vote. It's a Chinese community who have sent me 20 interns. We're encouraging people like you and you to reach out. We can get you internships at the State House.
That'd be awesome.
Getting involved is the way you folks learn about the process. And they have a great internship and it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, they do an excellent job in their teaching about how the government works. So I encourage you, send me an email, have your friends send me an email. We'll be happy to get you working as an intern. Most of it's volunteer with some of our Republican legislators. I think that's really important for young people to get involved at that level.
And to understand, so, Abby and I shared my business card with her today from the State Committee, right? So a lot of people don't understand that, process and who we are and what we do. And so just getting out there and knowing, who we are, what we do. We have a women's group in the Worcester County area. So Abby's going to help us out there. And I think it's really, just...
Definitely.
It's always outreach, right? But a great question, and I think we need to do more. We've had some struggles in the area.
Definitely.
And you had
I've
spoken.
had personal experiences at school. My friend who's not able to be here tonight, Zan, she and I started a group at my school, the Young Republicans, about a couple months ago. And out of the 2,500 students at my school, there was 5 of us. We tried to promote our group, and within a day, all the posters that we had put up were ripped down, and we were called fascists at school in the hallway, or I've been labeled racist just for believing in the conservative beliefs, I guess. And that's definitely difficult when everyone else around you is believing something different.
No question about it, and I urge you, if you have situations like that in the future and I can be of help, you can feel free to reach out to me, because that's totally unacceptable behavior and something that we as party members and leaders in our party have to stand with our young folks
Sure do.
also.
Definitely.
So
Yeah,
I want you to feel
absolutely.
free to reach out to me, and we'll get a group of people to go out and, you know, talk about that with some of the people that are in charge that are letting that type of stuff happen.
Definitely.
Yeah. Mike, have you had any experiences at your level of school, or you're going to college, but you've probably seen it here
A
and
little
there.
bit, like kind of. There's a very strong, like kind of like socialist movement community supporters in my school. So I kind of took a little jab at them because we do our, you know, student council elections. So I ran for president, but I didn't actually intend on winning. I just kind of wrote down a little satirical, like, communist speech, went up with a hat, Soviet hat, made the jokes, and went down. Afterwards, you know, people kept telling me, oh, these kids calling you a Nazi behind your back, or fascist, or just saying you're an idiot. You deal with it. So,
Well, I commend you both, because I know
Yeah.
it's not easy.
It's not easy,
It's not
this
easy, and I think it's
environment.
very courageous.
Very, very good. So that leads to a good question, you know, about the local city and town Republican committees. Why is membership and attendance at the local city and Republican town committees so important?
Because they're our future, and that's why I've spent so much time and effort reaching out to so many of the RTCs, because what we need to do is encourage people to get involved. If you really take a look back historically over the last generation and a half, you'll see that the Democrats have really got involved. They've encouraged young people to get involved, and that's why I'm encouraging everyone to get involved at the local level. You know, have meetings, get involved in your community. It's not all about politics. It's also about Republicans being out there helping people, getting involved in food pantries, getting involved in, you know, drives that are going on in your local communities. It's important that we are involved in our community, and that will attract young people. It will attract all ages to recognize that we are part of the community, and we have to work at that, because I think over the last generation or so we haven't done a good job at it.
Definitely.
So I encourage people to really get involved at all levels and reach out to your RTCs. Tell them you want to be involved.
Do you guys have any other questions that you wanted to?
Why are young people so willing to give up their individual liberty to be a part of a gang ideology of liberalism and not think for themselves? I've run into this many times in school. I might have a different idea than everyone else, and do you think there's any way you could help change that so that there's more individualism?
So I think when people are promised things for nothing, that's very attractive, right? We're going to give you this, we're going to give you that. But the fact of the matter is, nothing's free, and what we have to fight back, and we have to stand up and talk about, you know, what the core principles. I keep going back to that, and we have to, you know, point out that, you know, people remember. Take a look at Venezuela. They told everybody things were going to be great down there. There's a country under siege right now. We have an obligation as leaders and as young people to stand up and, number one, speak about what we believe in, but also to be able to back that up with coherent arguments. That means you got to study a little bit. You know, you've got to know it. One of my key components of what we're doing is developing a message to teach people about those things that I talked about several times here, and tie it back into resources. And we have to be educated about what we stand for. And we just have to be consistent and straightforward. And I'll tell you right now, in this environment, we have to be unafraid.
And you know, Jim, I think that's a great point. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about you being chairman, is just your genuineness and your commitment to be proud to be a Republican, and that's something I really relish, and I thank you for that, because all of us here, like we were saying tonight, we are fun. We're fun to be around. You know, we're good people. We do great things. I mean, these two young people beside me, I'm amazed at what they're doing,
Right.
and or what they've already accomplished. So be a leader. You know, that's it, it's easy to be a follower.
Right.
It's not easy to be a leader.
No, it's
so
not.
it's a good message.
You guys can do it, though, I can tell.
I want to do it.
Yeah.
I want to help the movement,
Yeah.
get more people involved. It's
That's right.
very important.
Yeah, let me come out and talk to them. Even though I'm old, I can come out and talk to them. My two boys are 25 and 24. They keep me young, let me tell you. I have to battle them all the time
You
about
got to bring ice cream, though.
Exactly,
You
hot
have to
fudge
bring
sundaes.
ice cream.
Perfect.
And flowers. No, but I mean, I think you raise a real important point. I mean, it's not easy, but, you know, it's challenging, but you have to continue to educate yourself about what we stand for and why it's so important.
I agree.
Jim, just in closing, we've got 2020 coming up. We obviously want to keep our Republican president in office. He's doing so many great things for the country. How are we going to resonate? I know there's a growing America, growing Republican organizations and to win. Are we, as a Massachusetts GOP, involved in that? How are we integrating? And I know you can't control everything, but just quickly, how are we promoting that readiness?
So I'm going down to DC next week just for that purpose, to see, you know, and be involved. I'm in communication with the RNC 2 or 3 times a week. We're using the data that the president and the RNC has put in place to identify, you know, like-minded people. They're helping us with fundraising. They're helping us with identifying voters. They're helping us with educating our constituents. The RNC and President Trump made a serious commitment to help local parties, and I'm actively involved with that regularly.
Great. Unfortunately, I have to say this brings our episode to a close. We'd like to thank you for watching Your Right to Know and sitting in with the FRCC. As we leave you, we want you to remember that your local, city, and town Republican committee is the only grassroots organization that supports and holds dear your liberty, your constitutional rights, and conservative values. We encourage you to join us. Why? Because for us, GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all. And because we always stand for freedom. Thank you, and have a good evening.
America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might.